Hi, this is Sheb Varghese. Welcome to the Faith Colloquium podcast. Today, my guest is Dr. John Mark Reynolds. Dr. Reynolds did his PhD at the University of Rochester in philosophy, and he's the president of the St. Constantine School in Houston and a senior fellow at the King's College in New York. And today we're talking about the state of higher education. Dr. Reynolds, you've spoken and written a lot about the state of higher education. Could you share with us your diagnosis of higher education kind of pre-COVID, and then what do you predict will be the state of higher education post-COVID?
Yes, pre-COVID, this is not anything different than I have been saying. It is that higher ed, particularly in non-state, non-Ivy League schools, has an unsustainable model just from a business perspective. And then on top of that, it isn't educationally sound. It's taking away from the student-teacher, the student-professor relationship. So it isn't even a particularly moral relationship. We have, for example, introduced usury into the process of getting an education. And since Christians have long been critical of the notion of usury, of charging interest, it seems like in particular, it would be like churches suddenly setting up some kind of program where they're charging people interest for what they're doing. Higher education is a really weird place to suddenly add debt, and debt that is paid for through interest. The other issue that you can run into in higher education, of course, is that student-teacher ratios are exploding. Many of the teachers are part-time, and this is causing other problems with people getting mentored. One big purpose of higher education in the United States should be to find the kind of lifelong mentor that can, I don't know, I'm old enough, like Obi-Wan to Luke Skywalker, that kind of mentoring that should take place.
Okay. And do you think post-COVID those patterns will continue? Do you think things will get worse? What are your thoughts about that?
Well, I think two things have occurred inside of COVID. One, many people are realizing what they're actually paying for in terms of content. And there will be some people who are just going to college. Another purpose in America is to get a kind of middle-class union card. It's expected that you go to college, so you go. And people are discovering, hey, I don't have to actually move to a town far away. Parents in particular who've been freighting a lot of the bill are discovering that maybe you can get the accredited union card without all the cost. A lot of private liberal arts colleges cost up to $40,000 or more a year. And is that really necessary in a world of Zoom? Of course it's really necessary if colleges are rite of passage and you're finding mentoring. If Jesus were here in the flesh the same way he was in 30 AD, we wouldn't prefer to Zoom call him than to go sit with him and eat fish and breakfast on the shores of the Lake of Galilee. And so if you're paying for mentoring and you're paying for this rite of passage, then that's excellent. Parents want the best for their kids. But too often they weren't getting that anyway. After all, is an on-site class with 200 people and an adjunct who's hustling around to 4 different schools really a lot better than the class in a can that so many online schools offer? I'm not sure it is. If you sit one-on-one with C.S. Lewis at Oxford, I'm pretty sure you can't capture that in a Zoom call.
Yeah, that leads into my second question, which is, speaking of Zoom calls, you've been critical in your writing about the sort of online school, get your degree online, colleges that push for the online education thing. And the case that's often made for it is that, look, it seems intensely practical. It's very convenient. It makes education more accessible to some people. And so aren't those good things that we would want from an education?
Well, and I'll go even further. I have, after all, started about 3 online programs. I never think we should put the perfect up as the enemy of the good. And so many people are in a situation abroad where, for example, a good classical education of the sort we're describing is entirely unavailable to them. Or they're in parts of the United States or with financing where a more conventional classical education is impossible to them, classical Christian education. if you're one-on-one or 10-on-1 in a group discussion, is online terrifically horrible? No, it really isn't. And in fact, we discovered we had to be online with the college program here at St. Constantine for the last 2 months of term, that a few of our students were advantaged by it. And so we got some good out of it as it went along. It was better than doing nothing. On the other hand, most online programs are not set up that way. You'll have over 600 students for every full professor and lots of teaching assistants, what amounts to salespeople handling the phone calls, mass grading. Many online programs are simply inferior versions of what's offered on campus. And the question always to ask is, how many professors, full professors, people who are full-time for the school, are teaching in the online program per student involved? Because why would anyone think that one professor could suddenly handle way more students because you're online? If part of the process of teaching is mentoring in a discipline or in a person's life, Jesus could handle 12 and he lost one of them. Why would we think we do a lot better? And so if online is set up to replicate that kind of mentoring, and it's a matter of convenience, it might be imperfect, but there's a lot of good to it. By the way, online shouldn't be less expensive done correctly than on site as a result. You shouldn't, you're charging too much tuition. St. Constantine, the college program at St. Constantine is $9,000 all in. We can give you one-on-one Oxbridge-style discussions for $9,000. And so everyone could do that if they weren't doing other things with the money.
What do you think about this, though? What do you think about the fact that we just live in a technological world, and that's the future of our society, and we just have to adapt to that direction?
Yeah, people are always making these arguments. They invented radio, and so everything has changed, and some things do change. I love technology. I grew up with a show that's so dated that it's funny to mention, Star Trek. And so I'm an early adopter of technology, and technology is awesome. Actually, online education, here's what should have gone online. We don't need, 100 some college presidents. We can have a few college presidents and organize ourselves non-geographically so that one college president can serve many local campuses. We could have put accounting offices online where people could live anywhere. Here's what ideally we don't put online. Here's one thing that hasn't changed. You still have a physical body, and I still have a physical body. And if we talk long enough, the cuckoo clock in my office is going to sound. It's a real thing. It's not a sound effect. And so here's a thing that hasn't changed about the world. People go on having souls and bodies. And so to pretend that we can ignore the physical aspect in an idealized form of education would be like saying, I can avoid eating because now I have the internet. Man cannot live on Hot Pockets and YouTube videos alone.
What do you foresee being the steps to a solution to mend this state of higher education?
Yeah, I get asked this a lot. I even get asked to consult on this a lot. And so here are 5 things I would do. The first thing I would do is cut the entire administrative apparatus at the college or university. And then I would rehire people who also teach to lead the different sections of the university. I would outsource as much of the business parts of the university or college as possible. Most colleges and universities get this. Very few of them run their own food services. Often they'll outsource their dormitory, maintenance and management. And so I would have as few people paying tuition dollars going to people who don't teach as possible. Now, it wouldn't be, at St. Constantine, we're small, and so we're able to have no one who's employed who doesn't teach. But most people, let's hire a CFO. Our CFO teaches actually 7th grade algebra, even though she's a former vice president of British Petroleum with a Darden MBA. So this is not an unqualified person. This is a heavily qualified person, but she also teaches. You're entirely different as an administrator if you teach. And by this, I don't mean the president sometimes teaches, ethics class that actually a TA teaches, and he comes and does a little bit. I'll do 30 some discussions with the college students here, talking about Plato, talking about the different things that I'm interested in. So that's thing number one. Thing number two is we need to phase out part-time employment, except in areas where part-time employment is bringing expertise or people that don't need or want full-time employment. So that's the second thing we need to do. And the third thing we need to do is we need to eliminate almost all those parts of college that don't deal with education, but kind of built up from, let's say, 1945 forward, or in some places earlier, the professionalized sports programs, the amenities, the attempt to create kind of a giant village out of a campus and instead utilize the communities we live in. The fourth thing that I would do is work to raise faculty salaries, and those administrators that do exist work to lower administrative salaries so that there's much closer to something like equity. And then finally, I would eliminate tenure.
That's helpful.
It's a pretty radical proposal. The other thing I would do is, of course, join undergraduate education with K through 12 education. I think they never should have been separated to start with. And a lot of schools would get some economy of scale out of teaching K through 16.
Okay. So my last question is Plato or Aristotle?
Well, that's an easy question. Plato, because he was right, not Aristotle, because he was wrong.
Okay.
Really about the nature of reality. But that's just cheap and cheesy and cheeky. So let me say something. I'm kind of with A.E. Taylor, who was both the Christian apologist that no one's ever heard of from the 1950s, as opposed to C.S. Lewis. And it's partly because C.S. Lewis was 100 times better writer than Taylor. But everyone should go take a look at Taylor's book, Does God Exist? Taylor was also the dean of Plato studies in his period. If you write on Plato's Timaeus, for example, he wrote the commentary. It's just exhaustive commentary. And while few people agree with his central thesis in that commentary, no one can avoid it because it's so masterful. And Taylor makes the point that we have overemphasized the difference between Plato and Aristotle, and makes what I think is a fairly persuasive case that Aristotle is a kind of Neoplatonist. My friends who are Thomists are really bothered by this, but then I'm not a Thomist, so I'm not bothered by their being really bothered.
That's great. Thanks a lot, Dr. Reynolds, for talking with me.
Thank you.
For folks who want to find your writing, you blog at Patheos at IDOS?
Yes, which means form, of course, and is just a tip to sometimes Aristotle is called the master of all who know. And Plato, in his forms, he's the master of all who know. So that's even better.
Nice. Great. Thanks a lot, Dr. Reynolds. I hope you have a great day.
Yeah, let's talk again sometime.
Well, we hope you enjoyed this episode. If you did, please subscribe and please share with your friends.